I mean, if you were my cousin, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, that should be the podcast where we just defend cousin marriages.
Hey, we separated from partition for that. Come on, we had a whole partition to escape the cousin marriage.
We did. We did.
Actually, what's wild?
We chose our sides.
Yeah, you ended up on the cousin marriage side. What's wild actually is somebody like in my extended family is having a cousin marriage, and it's like such fucking huge drama in the family. Like,
really?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I heard it through the grapevine basically because like it's like cousin 3 times removed or something, but like her parents are getting her into like an arranged marriage with her cousin, and like everybody's fucking talking about it. I don't know.
No, that is funny because on my side, my grandparents, my dad's parents are first cousins, and it was never a drama.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Cultural relativism. You know what? I'll respect the culture.
Yeah. Well, look, I've looked at the studies because I felt the need to. I love science.
You need to make sure that there isn't any genetic issues. Like
yes, exactly. I had some stake in this, and apparently, look, the studies show. Apparently, last time I checked, that when 2 first cousins have kids, those kids will be fine. But when if that offspring then has kids with their first cousin, then like that offspring, there's a chance it'll be some abnormalities. And then if that offspring has children with its first cousin, and it's highly likely that there will be problems. But just 2 cousins, and that's it. That's fine, apparently.
Okay.
According to Western journals, this is coming from.
Okay. You know how fucking mad I was though? You know how proud I've been that I'm not part of the cousin marrying culture? Like I would tell all my white friends that like I'm not part of the cousin marrying culture, and then like suddenly one of my cousins does it. You know how fucking mad I was? I'm like, God damn it. You betrayed our race,
Yeah. That's what you get for believing in the partition. That's your own fault.
How do you want me to introduce you? I keep on fucking up people's names.
Jafar Khan.
Okay.
And you're Preet. What's your last name?
I'm not giving out my last name.
You're not? Okay, that's fair.
I don't use my government name. I'm not a Actually, I had a professor on, and he basically doxed me while we were recording because he didn't know. Like a really big professor. I'm just gonna leave it in there. Fuck it. You know what? My last name.
Okay. Are we recording right now?
Yeah, we are.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Oh,
cool.
What's up, lovelies? We got Jafar Khan on. Super fucking funny leftist comedian. My brother from the other side. You could sort of say. Wait, I'm assuming you're Pakistani. This whole conversation, I've been assuming.
Yes, I mean, I'm very obviously Pakistani.
I know the name, everything.
I opened defending cousin marriages.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you need really.
My brother from the other side of partition. One of the best comedians on TikTok, on social media, in my opinion. If you're looking for leftist comedy, check him out. Do you want to introduce yourself?
That was great. I just wanted to say thanks. That was a great intro, and I'm a big fan of your stuff on there as well. And you were very funny yourself as well. So
thank you.
I was excited to do this.
Thank you. I've also done stand-up comedy myself one time, so I think I'm an expert.
Really, you should do it. If you're into it,
Yeah, I should.
Well, yeah, you want to keep it private. I was gonna ask where you live, but I think I know where you live, and I think there's a lot of stand-up there.
There is. Yeah. Okay. So, just starting off, like, what do you think the role of comedy is in our society, like as it operates currently, like stand-up, things like that?
Well, This might be a disappointing answer, but what's the term for it? I don't know. Like, for me, it's very simple. Just mostly just entertainment.
Yeah.
Whatever you think, any sort of, art form you can consume, whatever function that, same as, watching. Why can't I think of one show? It's
Uh,
not a like Bridgerton, or same as like painting that looks nice. So I don't really like uh I don't really personally ascribe to like the politics of the potential of the politics within stand up.
right.
I generally look at it more as like it's a nice like reflection of like um where our politics are going and stuff, and sort of
Yeah.
like what is that term, like the Overton window,
Absolutely. Yeah.
um but then again, I say that, and at the same time I do find myself uh especially after October 7th, making comedy sketches online that does seem to somewhere in there have some sort of goal, political end of just like trying to, propaganda basically.
Yeah.
So I guess I'll put it that way. And I use the word propaganda in like in a non-loaded sense. You know what I mean? Like in a neutral sense, like anything that has a political perspective that is media, um, in that sense of the word propaganda. Um, so maybe I'll allow myself to like kind of contradict myself and my feelings, because I do have contradictory feelings towards it. Where on one end I do like to I think it serves a function for me personally. Like if I always, as a comedian myself, if I always try to look at it a purist perspective of like it's non-political, it's just there to be funny, it's just there to entertain. I think it serves a function for me to look at it that way. I think that makes me a better and funnier and more accessible comedian. But at the same time, I have to admit, like, I am literally making comedy that I hope serves an end politically, to just get people to, you know, after like October 7th, I was on Instagram, and I wasn't making comedy about it right away. I was seeing, so many of my friends and community in the New York comedy scene just have these reactions, like so many people did, most of the Americans did, to October 7th, that were scaring me, So I just was just trying to explain things to them in like just literally posting text,
Yeah.
and it was getting like big traction. Like people were sharing it and stuff, just trying to explain to people like, no, look at it this way, not that way. And then that kind of slowly turned into me going back to comedy and doing the same thing. Now I'm making sketches but it had the same intention. Whereas like the political comedy I was doing before October 7th was just like kind of, I'm just doing this for me. Like, I think this shit is hilarious. Other people will think this shit is hilarious. I'm interested in politics, but I will say that, and I'm sorry for this very long-winded answer, that really I was figuring it out on the way. But that's what I'll ultimately say, is that since October 7th, for me personally, a lot of my comedy I was posting online did take on this new sort of this new goal of functioning as a little bit of like propaganda, in that like, hey, can we see it this way, please, instead of this other way?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in my opinion, comedy has sort of always just been a reflection of society, in general.
Yeah.
But like, a lot of comedy is just like observing things that we take for granted, right? Just the ways that things operate that we take for granted, like the government or even our culture,
Yeah.
and just like saying like, what the fuck is up with that? That fucking the beginning of every single Seinfeld episode, and I know he's like a raging Zionist, but like literally the
I love Seinfeld, dude. I hate the guy, but yes.
no, I fucking love that show. I've watched the shit out of it. Is that like he just like, what's the deal with airlines? What's the deal with girlfriends? It's it almost is similar to leftism or like socialism in a way where like it observes society and just sort of analyzes it, like that's how I'd say comedy is. But I think a lot of comedy seems to like veer to the right, like a lot of comedians.
Oh yeah, big time.
Especially in the mainstream. Like why do you think that is? Like we've seen even like recently a controversy with Andrew Schultz. I don't know if you're comfortable talking about it, but he said.
Oh, I am.
Okay.
Yeah, we could get to more specifically Andrew Schultz in a second, but I love this topic broadly. Like to me, I totally agree with like the baseline observation. I think most people would, but stand-up has shifted to the right. If we could make like a generalization about the politics of stand-up as a whole, which is a huge generalization, obviously, but before, generally, it was more. We think of classic stand-up like George Carlin's, like being from the perspective of the underdog and of the outcast and punching up. But even during those times, there were the people who weren't doing that, like the Andrew Dice Clays and whatnot. But primarily, like the premier stand-ups were the ones more, you could say, on the left. Now that's switched now, and I think the reason for it, the main reason, is like, and this will be fun because like we can get into like sort of more like Marxist type stuff, but like the idea of wokeness, and so more specifically, we could say like I would say the sort of Democrats for years now have really had nothing to offer except for identity politics. And so that sort of became what led to like more broadly as wokeism, right? And so people get very annoyed by that. It became so prevalent, just these sort of empty identity politics everywhere. It's very easy to make fun of. And stand-up particularly would be a great medium to be quote unquote anti-woke. And so you see all these stand-ups that are huge now because they are enjoying being anti-woke. It's a perfect, you know what I mean? It's a perfect place to be anti-woke. Just say the little thing you're not supposed to say, and everyone laughs, and they find that, oh wow, it's we're all still here. The world hasn't ended. But of course, even that is on a spectrum, and you'll have like, people like Shane Gillis on one end, who I do like, I am a fan of, who's being a little bit more playful. You can sort of make more of a criticism of what his audience is like, the audience he's built, but him in a vacuum, his stand-up is more playful. And then you could go way far to the right, where it's just like outward extreme racism that is getting big now as well. So I think it's sort of, I would diagnose it as like the woke and empty, a response to sort of woke empty identity politics, which is sort of like overcome like liberal Democrats, whatever you want to call it, in the last like 10 15 years.
Yeah, I think really as sort of like neoliberalism has gone mainstream and like become entrenched within society, like like universities, this like Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton-esque like neoliberalism. I think like there's just a large section of the American population that sort of feels like they're pseudo oppressed. Like white people, men, things like that. Just these like traditional power groups that are sort of losing their power to diversity capitalism. Like that's not really like, I think anybody who's like Marxist or socialist or left leaning like knows like it's not a real like liberatory thing.
Yeah,
It's just like
it's like what glass ceiling politics, right?
Yeah.
Instead of yeah.
yeah, it's like slapping a pride flag on a Boeing rocket. Being dropped on, or even like a feminist sticker, like on a Boeing rocket being dropped on gay people and women, like it's absurd. But
Exactly.
I think because there is this perceived sense of like loss of power for white people and men, and you know what, on a cultural level, there is a little bit like and it's good. I mean, I would argue that women getting more rights and minorities getting more rights is a good thing, but.
Yeah, net positive, but you do see like the little absurdities that are easy to call out, of just it becoming those sort of pervasive identity politics of just like white people are bad and people of color are good, like that is silly, like, you know what I mean, like.
Absolutely.
And you just see it in front of you. You see like they love to harp on movies and Hollywood, and they're it's mostly very silly that they choose to focus on this as like society's main ills and not like the actual ills of society. But at the same time, like the shoehorning of like the let me put it more specifically, like the sort of thoughtless shoehorning of diversity into movies and TV when it's done in this such like, you know what I mean, like not in a thoughtful way, that it's just so easy to make fun of. It's silly, and that's what they're doing.
Yeah. I mean, I see both sides of the argument. Like, I can see like how like little black kids would absolutely love seeing like a black mermaid, but also sometimes it's just done not very tastefully, and also like
I want to clarify. I'm more referring to that it's not done tastefully. Like I love seeing like more people represented on screen and stuff. It is great. Like Black Little Mermaid is great. I love that. But just when it's when it's done in this very clear, kind of overly overt
corporatist way.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, but just all this, like, I think neoliberals have just sort of offered this like very goofy caricature of society, and there's just a large section of society that feels pseudo oppressed, and I think these conservative comedians really speak to that section of society that sort of does want to go back to the good old days when certain people couldn't drink at the fountain, and but they don't want to admit it to themselves.
They weren't confronted with those things, right? They didn't have to answer to any of this, and now they do, and they don't like that.
Yeah, but you're absolutely right. The neoliberals are such a caricature and so easy to make fun of. That it's an easy punching bag. It's absolutely
And I try to like tell people this, like, a lot of liberals, like, in their mind, like they can't wrap their head around why anyone would vote for Trump, let alone like 40% of the country, right?
Yeah.
And I try to tell them, like, the way you're more so a Democrat and a liberal because of how easy it is to paint Republicans as the Republican Party as bad. It is just as easy to paint the Democrats as bad and paint CNN and MSNBC as just corporate shills.
Yeah.
And just stand-up comedy happens to be a perfect medium to go after the cultural nonsense of the Democrats, which can be like these empty identity politics and wokeism. And so that's just, and I would say the other side, the other part of why stand-up has taken this right-wing shift is social media, the algorithm, right?
Yeah.
I heard recently, Anthony Fantano, I don't know how much of a nerd
I love Anthony Fantano. What do you
Me
mean?
too. All right, good. But he like I saw on some TikTok or whatever, he was talking about like how the algorithm, in his opinion, is like ruining music, and I would say the same thing about stand up because like part of like building a following on social media is quantity, right? Producing enough content to feed your content machine, and stand up is like takes a while to build like a really good bit or an act, you know. And so it's not a great medium for just quantity. But one way you could get around that is doing crowd work. Now you don't have to like have all these perfectly chiseled bits and jokes. You have these fun moments with the audience. And so people have been mining crowd work to feed the algorithm. And the thing about crowd work is that it's more so about the spectacle of it. And so crowd work also then lends itself to saying like the little racist thing, the little sexist thing, the little thing you're not supposed to say, like, oh no, am I being bad right now? So it also is lending itself to more like anti-wokeness, which goes with the right.
Yeah.
Does that make sense what I said?
No, absolutely. And I would also say the algorithm pushes less like funny jokes. Like I know like so many fucking funny comedians, like my homie Davey, who's a Chinese comedian. He's really big in his province in China. He's not that well known here. Or my homie like Miguel, who does a lot of stand-up shows in Sacramento. In the area, and they have just these absolutely like fucking funny bits, but the algorithm would much rather prefer like outrage. You know, like the algorithm is so geared towards outrage, anger, and it's often a very simplified.
That's a great point.
Yeah. And it's often like a very simplified anger. Like it doesn't really get into the nuances of a topic. It's more so like Starbucks employee, they, them, the gender, and then like that's it. You know, like so much nuance is left out of these just complex conversations, especially with these like comedy bit clips that just lend so much to like what they essentially do is they create a caricature of like the LGBTQ movement or the progressive movement, and that's just what gets spread, like outrage and things like that.
Yeah. So, yeah, overall, sad state of affairs for stand-up comedy right now.
I would say not necessarily. I mean, there's so many funny comedians out there that aren't assholes. You know, like you got to look for them. You got to look for them.
Of course.
But obviously, like, the big ones that are really being pushed heavily. I
would, say it's like any other art form, like, you know, like whatever you want to call it, like rock and roll or hip hop, like there will always be people have like different times in different moments in time where they were like, oh, it was going good then, it was going good now, but it's more so about like the relationship with like the mainstream culture, because there's always going to be good rock and roll or hip hop or death metal artists. It's just whether or not they're getting attention or not. So I think in the same way with stand up, like I know so many amazing stand ups that are not getting the attention, and instead today when people think like, oh, stand up comedy, they think Joe Rogan, Andrew Schultz, Mark Normand, all those guys.
I will say Joe Rogan and his whole like Avengers squad is the root of this evil. Like that is the root of, like, if you can destroy Joe Rogan, like you absolutely destroy this like right wing comedy bent. Like that is the root, pretty much.
I guess I don't know. I would I think we should say, since this is like a Marxist podcast, like no, like a new Rogan would come, would have to be structural. We would have to do to prevent a new Joe Rogan.
How dare you
rise up?
How dare you do a structural analysis to my joke about destroying Joe Rogan.
That's all right. My bad, bro. But yeah, there will be another Joe, I believe.
Yeah,
unfortunately.
Yeah. No, absolutely. But yeah, recently Andrew Schultz got into a little bit of hot water for making a pretty insensitive joke about a black woman, and even the two guests he had on had to apologize for laughing along and encouraging him. What do you think has sort of explained the rise of like this sort of like semi like I'm gonna edge being directly racist, but I'm gonna be pretty openly racist comedy, and this Andrew Schultz phenomenon?
Yeah, like I think as far as the controversy, like specifically this, I think and I didn't dive too far into it, but I would
Yeah.
I think I would say the error that those guys made is going on his podcast. Like that that type of that type of podcast is a very specific thing. You know what I mean? They're going to be racist. They're going to be sexist. That is what they do. So you have to decide, do I want to be on that podcast where they're going to be saying those things, and then I will have to react to that. And so I just imagine like it was all like, they're very successful. So they're at that level where they're like, oh, okay, time to do like a podcast tour. Their managers and whatever set it up, and they just like went with it. Like it makes so much sense to go on Andrew Schultz's podcast, like as just a career move. I think they should have been a little bit more thoughtful about it and shouldn't have gone on there. And then as far as like what he's doing on there, like, yeah, that's just that's his brand, like on. Like we saw everything play out the exact way as it would. Like, okay, there were rumblings on TikTok that people were mad at Andrew Schultz for being racist, and then mad at these. And I'm sorry, I don't know their names. These podcasters.
I don't either,
guys. And then those same people were mad at them for going along with it, and then we saw what happened. Like, those two guys, their audience, people who are mad were their audience, probably a lot less so than Andrew Schultz's audience. So they apologized because their audience is mad at them for what happened at Andrew Schultz's show. But of course, Andrew Schultz did not apologize. Of course, he doubled down because his audience was not mad at that. That is what his audience is there for. It was just a clashing of two audiences that should have not, like, you know what I mean? They should not have been on that show. This is exactly what's going to happen.
Yeah. It was just sort of a powder keg waiting to like explode. We've seen like this really weird uptick of like I think these are like TikTok comedians really. We were sort of like going around it, but like Theo Vaughn, this Bobby Lee, who's the ginger he does the podcast with?
Yes, Andrew Santino.
Yeah. All of these like and of course Andrew Schultz. There's this new phenomenon of comedians that are like clip comedians, TikTok comedians, where like such few of their audience is actually watching like their whole podcast or their whole comedy bit, but they're like getting these like very little snippets, and I think just the market itself sort of encourages them to be as controversial as possible. Like the wilder the shit you say in like a 30-minute clip, the more eyes you get on yourself. And so I think, of course, this is like deep rooted within Schultz himself, like obviously, but also I think there's been a market created that encourages him to say, punch down, punch down. Like this isn't like a black comedian commenting on like funny things he's found within the black community, as like just through lived experience. It's not like a black person making fun of his own community. It's an outsider really punching down in a way that degrades, this community. That's just been, I mean, I think Andrew Schultz has won no matter what. Like this controversy, his fans love him no matter what.
Oh yeah, I mean they're all operating like in their own ecosystems. You know what I mean? Like so they both did what they were supposed to do given their fan bases. They were supposed to apologize to their fans, and Andrew Schultz was supposed to double down for his fans, and that's what he did. I think Andrew Schultz, if you look at his trajectory, he it's his success is there's a real admirable quality. I mean, there's an admirable quality to most of anyone who makes it in the arts, and his he was YouTube. He started using YouTube in a way that no one had before, and what we're seeing, the new version of we're seeing now is Josh Johnson. I don't know if you've heard of Josh Johnson, but he's putting out these 30, 40-minute clips every week on YouTube and has built a big audience on that. Andrew Schultz was doing that in a smaller version years ago, but got huge off of doing his own thing and putting out these weekly stand-up clips. And he was talking about race. He was being a little edgy guy, but people loved it. He blew up, and he's had this success now for a very long time. For a lot of people, they might think Andrew Schultz's success is new, but he's been successful at this point for a very long time. So that with that comes all the narcissism of success for that long. He's not going to have the humility to, whoever he brings on to his podcast has to listen to him. If you're Mexican, he's gonna say Mexican shit. You know what I mean? And he's not gonna have any humility with that at this point whatsoever.
Yeah. I mean, it's he clawed his way from the bottom, and I mean, all these comedians have charisma. Obviously,
of course,
it's a very Trump-like phenomenon. I would almost say,
big time, dude. Trump is such a stand-up dude. When he's up there. I remember one of my friends, he was so smart. He's not a politics guy, but he's just a guy who's kind of smart and in a social way. And way back before, when Trump was still looked at, during the 2016 election, when Trump was still looked at as a big joke, my buddy, he was my buddy Chase, he's also a comedian, Chase DeRusso. He was Trump is going to win, and he was looking at his rallies. Yeah. And in hindsight, it's very obvious now. But if you look at those rallies, the way he's being a comic up there, he's holding the crowd in the palm of his hand, and he's riffing, he's making jokes, but then the way his relationship with the audience when he's up there is much more similar to a stand-up comedian performing in that relationship than a politician giving a speech.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely. The energy. I'm sorry, but the energy is not there in Democratic, any Democratic. It's so professional in a Democratic convention and things like that. But go
exactly. Well, yeah, Trump is talking to you when he's up there. You know what I mean? In the way stand-up is different than sketch. When it's he's broken the fourth wall up there. It's not live sketch, okay, they're doing their sketch, but they're not talking to you, but Trump is talking to you. He's bringing, it's a big illusion, the fact that he presents himself as an everyman. We all know that he's not an everyman, but that is how he is presenting himself, by talking directly to the audience. And now of course you see the Democrats are trying to mirror, they're trying to copy that as well. So it's he's really done this whole seismic shift in politics. But yeah, I very much see these comedians being Trump-esque, and I very much see Trump being a stand-up comedian when he's up there.
Yeah, but Kamala and Waltz were just so bad at it. It was so corporatized. That fucking video that they made where they were talking about the burrito, white guy tacos, or something like that. It felt so corporate and not. It almost felt like, I'll say Trump feels like your local comedian at like a bar or something, or like something like that. And Kamala and Waltz feel like SNL, like an SNL skit.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. And I mean, I love that you brought up SNL. That is the perfect, like, you could look at these modern stand-ups that we're talking about here as a response to what SNL is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And yeah, generally, I don't know. I was gonna say they are funnier than SNL, but I was like, are they? And then I was like, I think they are.
They're definitely.
They are.
In my opinion, at least. I don't think.
Yeah.
Okay, you know what? It's such a trope to say SNL hasn't been funny in fucking years, and everybody's been saying that since SNL started. But genuinely, I don't even know. Modern day SNL is so. It feels so corporate. Maybe it's always been. Maybe SNL's never been funny. I think that's the truth.
It's hard to say. It's literally impossible for us to say. We can only live one lifetime. You're right. Like, we were young when it was out. When we loved it. Everyone says that's one thing Lorne Michaels says.
Yeah.
Lorne Michaels says that the best run of SNL was whenever you were a teenager.
Absolutely.
And that seems to be true. But I do think, and again, I could be wrong on this, but I feel like SNL is more political now than it was before. And I think that will make it less funny unless you have interesting politics, which SNL does not. Then nor do they have bold politics. I mean, it's just like CNN sketch comedy. Then yeah, that's gonna suck. That's not gonna be funny.
I also think SNL represents like a dying medium, like traditional. Both it represents like a dying political side. Like, I think everybody's sort of just done with neoliberal austerity and just sort of this fake liberal politic. But also it's also entrenched within that like old Hollywood media that's like sort of being out of touch and dying to like Zoomer fucking and Gen Alpha, Ohio Riz, Skibbity, whatever, fucking Roblox.
It's very true. I mean, it's sad because it has so much potential. Like, maybe I'm old, but I love the idea of SNL. Like, we're going to do a live sketch show, a televised live sketch show once a week on Saturday night, and you can tune in to see us try to pull this off. That's a huge undertaking. Like that, just try to imagine the stress level there to do a live sketch show in front of millions of people once a week. And I will still like put on like Sunday, if it's Sunday morning and I got like nothing to do, smoke a bowl thing, like, oh, let me put on last night's SNL episode. Not because I have any interest in I want to consume those sketches, but the interest is in like, let's see how they tried to pull this off, this big thing, this big challenge. And it sucks that the product is so bad that so many people have been turned off by it because I think if it was good, then like a lot of these young kids would find it refreshing that it's not some like TikTok meme skibbity. It's like, oh, they're trying to do a live sketch show every week.
Yeah. I mean, it's lost a lot of its organicism. I think that's why these like right-wing comedians are so popular right now, because they have something in them that's organic and charismatic, and they're on the pulse of at least like a section of society, especially like a white male section of society that feels humiliated, like a little bit humiliated.
Yeah, that's a great point. You're right. They are on the pulse of something. SNL's on the pulse of nothing.
Yeah. It's the only person that laughs at SNL is like my mom or something. Fucking the Alec Baldwin Trump era,
God, oh my God, I would get so angry, viscerally angry, seeing Alec Baldwin be Trump. Like, he was so bad at it, so bad. And it was another thing of like SNL like hollowing itself out. I think they tried to. I mean, they realized it because they were just going with celebrities, right? They were having Alec Baldwin be Trump, he sucked, and now they're trying to fix it. They're trying to get cast members to be Trump and Biden again, as they should, right?
Yeah.
But
I will
know.
say, that one guy is genuinely who is he? The one who is always dating
Austin.
celebrities?
Well, Pete Davidson.
Yeah, he's genuinely got something funny to him, I will say.
Yeah.
He is charismatic.
Yeah, has an authenticity to him.
He has an authenticity that I think a lot of the rest of the SNL lacks.
Well, yeah, it's stand up versus sketch. Like,
yeah,
stand ups have authenticity but no talent. And then the sketch people have the talent. They can actually act and do the characters. They don't really. Now, of course, I'm speaking in generalizations. They generally don't give you the authentic personality, whereas the stand-ups generally do give you that, but they don't have. What famous Pete Davidson character did you remember on SNL? None.
no, it's just all Pete.
But he's offering singing himself.
Yeah,
what people loved.
Yeah. But yeah, I will say, like, to find like the funniest sketch comedian available right now, it's not on like TV. Like, you go to YouTube, right? Like,
you go to
TikTok, like that's where the funniest sketch comedian trio group, organization is, and
yeah.
SNL is like such a behemoth that's entrenched within like this traditional Hollywood liberal and then neoliberal politic, because it exists in a superculture dying system that it's just not in touch with anybody except for like maybe your Gen X mom, but
exactly.
Moving on, so many right-wing comedians feel like oppressed, like they will like say like, I can't say anything anymore, like I'm getting canceled. Jerry Seinfeld says he can't perform on college campuses anymore, just what do you think is behind this sort of like, on one hand they're saying like shit is so bad for me right now, and on the other hand they're like making millions, they're packing houses, like it's this weird double thing that they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, it is. I would just say they're just so rich and out of touch at this point. They don't realize how ridiculous they're being. I mean, I think Dave Chappelle. I talk about him a lot with other comedians because, like, I think he embodies sort of being so rich you're out of touch, because they're so rich they don't have any problems, and so when a problem does present itself, it's like, oh, you got a ad review in a college paper. Now this is the only thing that has inconvenienced you in years. So of course, and then they're so out of touch they don't realize it's nothing, and then they make it their crusade. Dave Chappelle is like he's literally a comedy god. You know what I mean? Like, in terms of the world of stand up.
Oh, absolutely.
He's a living deity, and no one questions him. He smokes cigarettes on stage when he's not allowed to. He's got a shirt with his logo on it, And then he put out a special where he was transphobic, and he got pushback.
Yeah.
And wow, Dave Chappelle, the god, got pushback. And so his mindset as someone who accepts his god status was like, well, now this will be my crusade. And now that's been his crusade.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these guys aren't even fucking buying groceries anymore. Like, if you ask them, like, how much is a carton of eggs, they wouldn't be able to. Well, actually, I don't know how much a carton of eggs is off the top of my head either. But so that's probably a bad example. But
well, yeah, I think you're just like me, where you go to the grocery store, you just know what you're gonna get, and then at the end you get your price, and you're like, damn, that's a lot.
Absolutely. How the fuck was this like $100 or something?
Yeah.
But they're just so out of touch with like average people who are thinking like, how am I gonna make rent by the end of the month, that they get stuck on these like really dumb, in my mind, of course, but to them it's so important, cultural wars, right? And they feel oppressed because I think it speaks to sort of like a narcissism, but also that they're just flawed human beings, everybody is a flawed human being to some extent, and we all have our biases, internalized biases, racisms, like
except for RBG. Yeah, we all have our flaws.
yeah. um, oh, Ruth Badger Ginsburg.
Yeah, yeah.
I gave you a polite laugh, but what the fuck?
That was my joke. That was
RGB? Yeah. Is that what they abbreviate her as?
Yeah. Haven't heard that?
No, I thought you were talking about the gaming laptops with the lights. The LEDs.
No, bro. I'm talking about Ruth Bader Ginsburg being the only perfect human being we've ever had in our lifetimes.
Yeah, she was, honestly. She was such a queen. Fuck. I got off of my. What was I talking about?
I don't know. I'm sorry I derailed you with my. It was really not at all. If you just for some reason you've never heard of RBG before, it's your fault. That joke deserved the polite laugh.
I'm sorry. This is the millennial Zoomer fucking divide. This is the millennial Zoomer fucking because you say that abbreviation and it's a Supreme Court justice, and I hear that abbreviation and it's a gaming laptop with fucking lights and things like that. But
you know what a Rube Goldberg machine is?
Yeah, I do, absolutely. I know that one.
One time, one of my friends, he was trying to say Rube Goldberg machine. He said Ruth Ginsburg machine, and that was one of the hardest I've ever laughed. Anyways,
no, that is genuinely funny. I hope you clowned him like absolutely for like years afterwards.
We laughed for a long time. Yeah, I'll bring it up sometime still. So
that's good to hear. That's good to hear. But these are for like I found it. These are like flawed human beings who suddenly have like this spotlight on them, and when you have those prejudices and you aren't like working on them, like suddenly it just becomes a powder keg and you sort of double down on it because like your narcissism, it's confidence turned into narcissism. Like it's genuine confidence at your talent turned into narcissism. You don't want to admit that you're a flawed human being, and it's
I mean, there's that. I agree with that. The narcissism of the the praise. Everyone loves you. You're getting all this. Yeah. You're getting a superhuman amount of love and adoration. And then I would go back to what the other thing you said, which I think is the bigger part of it, is that they're rich. They're rich for a long time now, and when you're rich, you get to be a little bit of a superhuman as well, and so.
Oh yeah. And then you have all these like Hollywood connections, all these government connections, like you get entrenched in the base and the superstructure of society. Like you get entrenched within like all the bankers and the Hollywood people, and like you have all these connections.
Yeah, and just the simple reality of that you're rich, so you have more freedom. You get to fly around to wherever you want, eat wherever you want to eat. People come bring you whatever you want, and it's like it's power.
Absolutely.
And so they get drunk off of that. And also the other part of it is a lot of these fucking comedians were born super rich and privileged to begin with. And so it is a part of their success as comedians today, and it's a part of why they refuse to live in reality.
Yeah. Yeah, because to have like left-wing politics in Hollywood would mean you want to almost destroy the very system that you're comfortable off of,
Mm-hmm.
And like even like people like Hannibal Buress, who was like homeless at one point, like sleeping in like a Starbucks, or at least that's his story. I mean, I don't know. I've heard so many stories where like people have exaggerated how low they were, like Andrew Tate's story about how he was eating like KFC out of a trash can or something like that. Like I don't believe that. I don't believe that.
I mean that's the accepted story of Hannibal sleeping on the train. That's.
But like once you get to those once the money starts rolling in and you start investing that money, right, it almost becomes your self-interest to not be connected with the masses, to be within this sort of bourgeois sphere. You become like culturally on the other side of the class war. That's what I'll say. But why do you think that the right wing, why do you think the left wing has had such a hard time penetrating comedy? While the right wing has just been absolutely going wild. And I know you said like before, like, you know, with like George Carlin, it used to be there, but like why in recent years do you think left wing has had a hard time in that sphere?
I think okay. So with stand up specifically, I think you know, you'll see a lot of I guess I would say like what does it mean to be political when you're up there? Because like
Yeah,
these right-wing stand-up comedians, they're not literally up there talking about right-wing politics
absolutely.
in the way like we imagine left-wing stand-up comedians. When you say that a left-wing stand-up comedian, you're probably imagining a stand-up comedian like Carlin or Hicks who is literally being political on stage,
Yeah,
whereas the right-wing comedians they aren't really doing that. They're just being you know, racist. They're just being anti woke, you know. So I think one, I would say that a lot of the left wing comedians, they do exist, and if you grant them like the same sort of uh separation from directly talking about politics, you know, there's a lot of left wing comedians who are indirectly talking about politics. Um, they're just not they're just not a part of this new like bloodthirsty audience of stand up who wants the anti wokeness. And then the other part of it I'll say is that the medium of stand up, like I said before, is great for being anti woke, but it's not great for like, or at least the way people enjoy stand up now. People don't want someone ranting and raving to them about the way society should be, like they did in the 90s with Carlin and Bill Hicks. Now, they just want someone personal who's talking about their life, who's being personal, and it's just being like fun. And so that could easily be someone who's being playfully racist or sexist, and that is their quote unquote politics, their right wing politics. But like, if you want like explicit left wing politics, then either it's again going to be, either it's going to be implicit, or if you want it explicit, stand-up's not really the medium for that. Like, it's like memes, you know. Like, I think the best, like, if you want like comedy, left-wing comedy, then the best we have, and what I think is really good, is memes on the internet. I don't think there's been anything in recent years that is like not converted, but you know, helped people sort of see things from, you know, our, you know, more of a left wing perspective. I think it would be the memes and stuff. And I know at this point I'm just ranting and raving, but that'll be my answer. One, that left wing politics are probably there; they're just not explicit in stand up. And then two, if you want explicit politics, then stand up isn't really the best medium for that. Maybe memes are, as far as left wing politics go, and you do see a lot of great stuff there.
yeah, yeah. I also think when people are looking for just entertainment, I don't think they're trying to feel uncomfortable because like a left wing, I've seen like jokes that my friends have made, like obviously, you know, and Miguel's gonna kill me because I forgot his last name. He's just comedian Miguel for now. But I've seen like jokes he's made about like how like his brother got arrested by the police, right? And you know, he made like a really fucking funny joke about how they found the drug stash, but they couldn't find his Xbox, you know, that his parents were saving for Christmas, you know. But when he told that joke, like it was the audience, you could feel how uncomfortable. As much as people were laughing, you could feel how uncomfortable they were with racism, with like how society operates, just things like that. Whereas I think the medium stand-up comedy lends itself much easier to like a right-wing critique of society that's like a lot more comfortable for people. a black woman be cray cray and LGBTQ people need to shut up. Like, and
Exactly.
it's so much less uncomfortable to laugh at that because you've already sort of already won. I would also say outside of just the comedy sphere, like the comedy sphere being on top of the base of society, like the economic production of society, things like that, the left wing has just been losing within the Western world. Even like moderate left wing, like Keynesian economics, like we have just been on a downward spiral within the Western world, and the right wing has been slowly growing in power. And so I think comedy's just sort of reflecting that too.
Oh yeah, it's reflecting that same thing, which I guess has been my theme for this whole podcast is on one end, like you said, it's the reflection of what's already happening, and two, it's just the strengths and weaknesses of the medium of stand-up itself, where like a lot of stand-up at its most fun is like saying the thing you're maybe not supposed to say, the naughty thing, but we're all kind of thinking it. Oh, look, the guy who has the mic who's saying the jokes said the thing. And it's really easy to see what that would be if you're like a right-wing guy. But to be on the left, like, it's just a little bit more challenging. Like it's harder. Like, okay, your target is more like nebulous, people in power and stuff. It's a lot easier to just punch down at like whatever marginalized group that a stereotype already exists for.
Yeah.
The joke is already fucking there. They're not even making new jokes. They're just saying the joke that we already have implanted in our society. They're just saying it out loud, and then they get the stand-up like naughty points, and all of a sudden it's great stand-up comedy. Whereas if you want to do the same on the left, it's just more complicated. It's more challenging, so you see a lot less of it. And I agree, though, or I'm assuming we agree that I wish there was more of it.
Yeah. Sorry. I was dealing with something, so I didn't hear in the entirety of that, but I'll just add something like I did hear that I think just the biggest thing is that it's a lot more acceptable to be right wing. Like when you're left wing, you're almost attacking the entire audience, because right wing culture is so just entrenched within American society and Western society in general. I mean, what is Western society built on? Like white supremacy, capitalism, whatever you want to call it. Like all these. I'm becoming a little bit death to the West here, but of course, death to the West. All these like values that are unequal, and to be left wing is to be. It attacks the audience. Like to be right wing is what the audience wants, pretty much, because that is what they're culturally raised in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I agree with you, but you can do it. I try to
absolutely.
Here's a good example. I would say like I had made a comedy video, obviously, and it did really well. And it was about Radiohead. I was listening to a podcast about Radiohead and how their early career, long story short, they put out their first album, Pablo Honey. It was a giant flop. They literally broke up as a band, moved on with their lives, until a random DJ in Israel found this album. One song on there spoke to him particularly. He fell in love with it. So he starts playing it on Israeli airwaves round the clock. And the population of Israel also fell in love with the song to the point where they had a big concert. They literally brought Radiohead back together to come play in Israel. And that song was Creep, right?
Yeah.
So I learned that, and I'm like, this is fucking hilarious. Like, Like Radiohead would not exist if it were not the entire population of this ethno state embracing song Creep about being an outcast and no one around you likes you, everyone hates you. And they're literally singing I don't belong here, right? Um so TikTok, that's easy video for me to make because again,
Absolutely.
with everything online, the algorithm, you find your own audience. You don't have to think about casting a wide net. So I just made that video very directly, and it did very well.
Absolutely.
Now, doing this for stand up, that's a whole different story because your job as a stand up is an entertainer, and you're assuming you're gonna have a politically diverse audience, and this would be very divisive to insinuate that Israelis, quote unquote, don't belong here, right? So I was talking to my girlfriend about Kelly Bachman, who is a great comedian, and she helped me get to where how I present this idea on stage, which is very different. And she pointed out what is actually funnier for me personally, because remember, my rule for stand-up is that whatever I talk about politics, it has to be personal. The audience does not want a guy ranting and telling you what to think. They want a guy being a comedian who's talking about their life. So my girlfriend pointed out to me, she's like, what's really funny here is that you actually love Radiohead. Radiohead is your favorite band. And I'm like, yeah, Radiohead is my favorite band. And I realized she was right. This for me personally, what's most funny is that obviously the thing with I don't belong here is funny, but on a personal level, aka stand up, what's funny is Radiohead being my favorite band. So that's how I bring it on stage. I bring it on stage. My favorite band is Radiohead. At this point in the show, the audience already can assume a lot of things about my politics and assume that I'm not a big fan of Israel. So when I present this present this bit on stage, it is more so about my own guilt, my own back and forth with Radiohead being my favorite band. And I instead present it as my girlfriend Kelly pointing out to me that Radiohead continues to play in Israel every year. And in this bit, I'm defending Radiohead as my favorite band. And then Kelly is pointing out to me that I'm being a hypocrite. And so the bit becomes that. It becomes my back and forth. And I end up saying the same things. Like I bring up, I don't belong here, but it's recontextualized. And so now the audience is laughing because I'm not telling them what to think about politics. I am talking about my own struggle with my favorite band, and it becomes like digestible stand-up comedy. But I'm presenting these very left-wing ideas. But, all this to say is that, there can be a lot more left-wing, explicitly left-wing stand-up comedy. And I also, wish there was more, and I think there will be more.
Absolutely. I think comedy works best when it doesn't sound preachy, and so oftentimes it's your own personal, like even these big observations of society that these comedians do. They're often reflected from their own person. It's like a personal observation. It's not them like reading like studies and like history books, and then no, it's just them walking around and just observing the world, and that's how it's presented.
How it's presented, right? I think that's the more important thing.
Yeah,
because I'll do this personally quite often, where I like an idea that I'm bringing on stage does come from like is rooted in a book or a study or something that I've had I've known about for a while, that as someone who tries to keep up with stuff, whatever. But when I present it on stage, I will present it more in a way where like I have somehow just came upon this in some other way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
To kind of because like exactly going by what you said, like they don't want. You're a comedian. The audience wants a comedian. They don't want someone who's talking at them, telling
Yeah.
them what to think.
And it's so hard to talk about these issues without sounding preachy. And the last thing you want to be is preachy when you're doing comedy. Like I've seen so many clips of people making jokes about Israel, and it's I agree with their messaging, like absolutely, but a good comedy show, it doesn't really make it doesn't have that organicism.
Yeah.
And so like it's like, dude, I absolutely agree with what you're saying, but maybe you should be on the street with a mic, at a protest,
Exactly.
rather than
Exactly.
feel
It's like, what's the medium? What's the medium here? I love that I found TikTok as an outlet, because I can put out all that stuff that's more like oh, I found this thing that I think more people should know about, and I think it's funny. I can just present that. I would never do it on stage. People will be like, what the fuck are you, like? I don't care, rightly as they should be. They came to a stand-up show. Why is the comedian trying to but I can, with TikTok, I can have that outlet, and then I can like be like, okay, but what should I bring to the stage of stand-up, which needs to hit this threshold of funny that's very high. You know what I mean? So that is my not gripe about all this social media stuff, is that it can give artists like multiple outlets, I think, which a lot of stand-ups need.
Yeah. Is like, as the world just becomes like more and more of this, what we're witnessing, I don't even know how to describe it, like just this dying, screeching like thing, is irony, and like even like just this sort of like comedic bent, like even making jokes, is that sort of dead? Like, is irony dead? Is our reality just the comedy sketch itself? Like, like as you watch, like, for example, like Israel defend itself in front of the ICJ, or like a State Department briefing, it almost seems like these institutions themselves become like a comedy sketch come to life, from the 70s, 90s, like what before would have been like an SNL sketch on the government is just Congress now, in a lot of ways, as this system becomes more honest, as it cracks.
Yeah, my friend Kath Barbadaro, who's a great comedian, she wrote this article that really stuck with me about this exact thing you brought up, of like, what is even the point of satire anymore? And her thesis for this article, basically, I hope I'm getting it right, but I think You Should Leave on Netflix, Tim Robinson.
Oh, I thought you were telling me to leave right now. Oh, okay. No, I'm not familiar. I'm not familiar.
Well, okay, you should check it out. But basically, it's a very absurdist sketch comedy show, and people listening, I feel like young people, a lot of people, it's gained this instant cult following because of how silly and absurd it is, and how much it is about nothing.
Yeah.
And I get maybe it's hard to explain since you haven't seen it, but
No. I just searched it up, and you're gonna hate me for this, but I do know what it is, but I've only seen it in TikTok clips. But I absolutely know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Watch it. It's brilliant.
Yeah.
So you get what I'm talking about. And so she was saying that like she was like, this feels like or like political comedy to me. And she mentioned several sketches that she explicitly broke down. The one that I'm remembering is in season 1, there's a sketch that opens up with her like in a clothing store, and all of a sudden there's a big crash, and all this debris in the air, and a vehicle just crashed into the department store. And as the dust, everyone's shocked, obviously, And then as the dust settles, you see it's a giant hot dog. It's a giant hot dog car, right? It's shaped like a hot dog. And everyone, like one person is like, oh my God, what the hell? And then someone is like, well, who did this? Like, where's the driver? And then the third guy is a guy in a hot dog costume. And he's like, yeah, who did this? Who's the one? Right? And then everyone immediately is like, dude, it's you. You're in a fucking hot dog costume. It's so obviously you. And then the guy in the hot dog costume is like, no, we got to get to the bottom. It's not me, but we got to get to the bottom of who it is. And like, no one is believing him, but he's just refusing to, and she compared that to like Donald Trump's politics and like the way he is, with his, which I thought was brilliant. Like that. And then as I watched it, I was like, I think this is like, he uses some lines like the way he goes wrong, like he says wrong in the sketch, like the way Trump would. So that was like an explicit comparison, but like even in a more broad sense, like the way he's being like so absurd and just absurd. I'll leave it at absurd. In this current political climate, like, does feel like more like political satire than just, seeing Stephen Colbert break down a thing Trump said offhandedly in one of his speeches. It's like, who gives a shit? What is the point of this?
Yeah. So sort of what you're saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, is reality has become so absurd that comedy that truly does satirize reality has to exist in this like even more absurd sphere where if like Stephen Colbert at SNL is doing a skit about like a Trump speech, like that's just almost literally to a T what's happened. But whereas like if he's doing in I Think You Should Leave a sketch where he's a hot dog guy claiming that he didn't drive the car into it, it's almost this perfect encapsulation of society, and still remains funny, whereas it doesn't feel like last week's news cycle.
Yes, that is exactly a great way to word what I was trying to word. So yes, thank you. Okay. That was me. Put quotes around that and a dash, and then me.
Okay, Jafar Khan. Okay, got you.
But really, my girl Kath Barbadaro. So look that up. Her article that she wrote about that.
Do you know the title?
No. Unfortunately, I don't know it off the top of my head. But yeah, look up Kath with a K, Kath Barbadaro, and then maybe like I Think You Should Leave, Politics, Satire, Being Dead. You'll find it.
Okay. Yeah. No issue. What I'll just round this off with just sort of, we're both Seinfeld fans. Obviously, our time's coming to a close. Was Jerry Seinfeld's comedy ever really that funny, like his stand-up? Because I feel like the intro to the show was the worst part of the show. Like when he was just doing like airplane food jokes. Like I never really found his stand-up in the show to be funny, personally. Like the intro. You know what I'm talking about? Like in the crowd where he's
exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
This is a great question. Obviously, Jerry Seinfeld's stand-up, watching it now, is atrocious.
I know.
But was it ever good? Was it ever funny? So, me and my girlfriend, Kelly Bachman, shout out to her again, we love having this conversation. And I think what we got to, more so she led us to, was that, like, Seinfeld was not just Jerry Seinfeld. It was Seinfeld and Larry David. And as we've seen we've seen what Seinfeld and Larry have both done post Seinfeld, right?
Yeah.
So which is interesting. It gives us some more variables we can study here, right? And what Jerry has done after Seinfeld was like what? Fucking like B-movie, complaining about college students, and a show where he just like him and another comedian suck each other off in a car, right? And Whereas what Larry David did after Seinfeld was Curb Your Enthusiasm, and we can see how Seinfeldian it is. And so we can see, like, through just not, it's not very scientific, but we could assume that, like, oh, okay, like all these like classic Seinfeld episodes that are really about like social criticism and stuff. We see the Larry David influence there, but then you'll have like an episode of Seinfeld, like this is what led to this conversation actually, where like one of the B plots, me and Kelly were watching, one of the B plots of the episode was how when you try to get a candy out of a vending machine, sometimes it won't come out. And that's it. That was the whole B plot. It was extremely boring, doesn't hold up. But that is Jerry Seinfeld. That is what his stand-up was about. And I think it was always not funny. And that show was just carried by Larry David.
Yeah. Yeah, I will say the way that Jerry Seinfeld's comedy came off was, if you've seen BoJack Horseman, the way that like 90s BoJack's comedy is presented is almost like an exact copy of just how not corporate, but Jerry Seinfeld was a very 90s comedian, I would say, like before comedy was, I mean, when he was a clean comedian. But and you can do clean comedy.
He's like,
no, go ahead.
I was just gonna say he is the stereotype of stand-up.
Yeah.
What's the deal with this, Jerry Seinfeld?
Yeah.
Anyways,
he's comedy you could play in like a elementary school, and it would be okay. Like a lot of his observations were very generic and boring, and they weren't really rooted in personalness or organicness. They were more rooted in why did the chicken cross the road sort of a joke, if you understand what I'm saying. But I think what was genius about the Seinfeld show overall was that it just critiqued society, and just things that we take for norm in society, and just frustrations we have about society in such a funny fucking way. And it made these characters that were extremes of like I think like just average groups in society, like Kramer, George Costanza, that it had an organic view of society that was lent itself towards rethinking, critiquing the world around you, that I think Jerry Seinfeld's comedy sort of lacked. And I think what you're talking about, that Larry David influence, which he has in Curb Your Enthusiasm. I mean, aside from like obviously Curb Your Enthusiasm's like atrocious Israel-Palestine episode, but we don't talk about that. We don't talk about that, but
we don't. Yeah,
I think it was really carried by. You're absolutely right. It was really carried by Larry David, and it satirized society in just such a beautiful way that was almost lent itself to, I wouldn't say left wing, right wing, but definitely in a way that was smarter than Jerry Seinfeld's comedy is. Because Jerry Seinfeld's comedy is a very surface level observation of society that's an elementary schooler could make. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, I mean in comedy terms, Jerry Seinfeld is observational comedy. The show Seinfeld is social satire. Yeah. And Jerry Seinfeld did not provide us social satire at all by himself, but Larry David did. And all Jerry Seinfeld has provided by himself is observational comedy. And so that's what I give him credit for on Seinfeld, is the episode where the candy bar couldn't fall out of the vending machine and it was making George mad.
Yeah. What's your favorite episode, though?
Man, it's so hard. I have watched it all the way through many times. Off the top of my head, the Master of Your Domain, where the competition to not the No Nut November little contest they had together.
They predicted it. They really did. They were ahead of their time.
They did.
Yeah.
They were, dude. Yeah, so many. What about you?
The episode where George, I forget the name, but where he gets mistaken for the neo-Nazi. I just think it's so.
Oh yeah.
It builds up to that punchline so beautifully, where they're like sort of. It's the awkwardness, and they just keep on building up on joke after joke after joke, and then the final delivery where the angry mob flips over the car and the liar revealed plot comes on, and it's just I think it was just a perfect encapsulation of what good comedy is, basically. But
For me is the world, huh?
Oh no, go ahead.
I'll do a quick the worlds collide episode where because George was such a great character, he was an insight into all of our own insecurities, and so the episode where his fiance, who he hated, was starting to become friends with Elaine, and his friend group was starting to merge with his fiance, and it was his worst nightmare.
Yeah. I will say, I was gonna close it off, but I will say, every single character is sort of like a reflection of you. Kramer, George, but the only one that I can't really see anybody being is Jerry, because Jerry was sort of a self-aggrandizing character who was always fucking beautiful woman, and he was surrounded by crazy people, and I feel like he pumped himself up in that role a lot, where I've met many Kramers and Georges before. I've met a lot of Dianes before, but I've never met a Jerry. I don't think a Jerry exists in the real world.
Jerry is I think the fictionalized and non-fictionalized real Jerry Seinfeld are both sociopaths. No one wants to be around them. But Larry David, George Costanza is based off of Larry David, the most relatable character, like one of the most relatable characters in the history of television. That's Larry David. And then Jerry Seinfeld is a fucking sociopath.
Yeah, that I don't think anybody can achieve, really. Like beautiful girlfriend every week, fucking living in a nice penthouse, always the good, like he's rarely ever wrong. He's always surrounded by people who are wrong, is how I would say, he is flawed.
It really says a lot. He big time. I mean, so extremely flawed. I mean, he comes off as so unlikable regularly on television appearances where they really try to make you look likable. He is so unlikable. But I think it really shows, what it shows is the way Seinfeld perceived himself and how Larry David perceived himself, and how one person is arrogant and one person is self-deprecating, which is what we want out of a comedian. We want the self-deprecating comedian, not the arrogant comedian.
Yeah. But Jafar Khan, so thank you so much for being on here. Did I say your name right? Did I fuck it up?
You did.
Oh my god.
Good job.
Oh my god. Okay. Say your name.
Jafar Khan. Yeah, you said it right.
Oh, okay. Thank God. Thank you so much for being on here. I've absolutely loved this conversation. Do you have any closing words, and where can people best find you?
I will say closing words. One, thank you for having me. I had a really great time. This was really fun. And then I would just say for my plugs, follow me on Instagram and TikTok. And Instagram especially, I post about my stand-up and my dates. If you live in New York, you could find me anytime performing, and if you're outside of New York, I'll probably come to your city at some point. That's it.
All right. Yeah, and I'll invite you to my cousin wedding next week. And yep.
Can't wait, bro. I'll officiate it.
We're This episode of the Pokepreet Pod has been brought to you by our generous members on our Patreon. If you'd like to become one of them, go to patreon.com/thepokepreetpod. Thank you. What the fuck? Glory to Stalin. I barely. And a special shout out to our Marshal of the Soviet Union member, Matthias T. If you'd also like a shout out, please consider subscribing to our Patreon, where you can also get episodes up to a month early. Thank you.